Fox Valley Memory Project, which is a nonprofit that serves people living with dementia, caring for people with dementia, and loving people with dementia throughout 4 counties in our region. So feel free to take one of these brochures that will tell you about the programs of Fox Valley Memory Project. The other brochures that I brought, you're also welcome to take for yourself or for anybody you know. There is a wonderful new program that is starting in just another couple weeks at First English Lutheran. This is a program that we have worked to bring to Wisconsin to provide 4 hours a day of respite care for people living with some type of dementia. So this is a program that started in Montgomery, Alabama, and is now spreading through the country. And in September, we had a conference over in Chippewa Falls to bring people together to tell them about this program so we could bring it to Wisconsin. And Appleton is the first place in Wisconsin that is going to be having this program. 4 hours of respite care, very well structured, just beautifully presented. And this program is in faith communities. You know, we have space. We have kitchens, we have tables and chairs, we have volunteers who would be joyfully on board with helping with this. And so First English stepped up. Terry knows the person who's leading it. Maybe some of you know Peter Peregrine. You know Peter. You know Peter. So Peter is an anthropology professor at Lawrence, who's taken early retirement to work at First English Lutheran to do dementia ministry. And it's just fabulous. So feel free to take a brochure, give it to somebody who might appreciate having respite care. They're doing it once a week, but they're really planning to get it up to twice a week. So this is a good thing.
What is the name of that program?
Well, it's called Living Spirit, but the program out of Montgomery, Alabama is called Respite for All. The URL is probably in here somewhere. Just Google Respite for All, and you'll find out about how cool this is. So it's just a marvelous opportunity for our community, and it's just going to be so much fun for the volunteers, too, and great for the families. Okay, so here's what I would like to do. Hopefully this will work. I just want to work through a couple of slides that generally talk about us as aging. Are you okay with that? Because I'm 75 and proud of it. So there we are. Okay, so this is one of my all-time favorite slides. John saw me reviewing these last night, and he said, "Oh, I've seen that before." It's one of my favorites because, of course, I love maps. But this is a slide that shows what is happening in Wisconsin over the course of a mere 20 years in terms of population aging. So what you see happening is that there is a great increase in this darkest color, which indicates that those counties will have, in the year 2035, from 27.1% to 43.4% persons 65 and older. Pretty interesting, isn't it? This comes out of the Department of Health Services in Madison. So I really want you to keep this in mind because there are so many implications of this. There are implications, of course, because the greatest risk factor for dementia is age, right? And if you look at this and you see the counties that are going to have this high a percentage of older adults, we can then start to do the math in terms of what we know about prevalence rates on dementia. And, you know, you can figure it out. I've done this for a lot of counties all over the country. It just sort of raises your consciousness, I think. But I also want you to look at this slide and think about the implications for congregations. What is this saying to us about faith communities of all denominations? And overlay that aging of the state with what we have been reading about for the last, year, 3 years, 10 years, about the fact that fewer people claim a religious identity in our country. Okay? So keep those things in mind as I work through a couple more slides.
I see that
Anybody wanna
aging.
say? Yeah.
I see that aging is outside the major cities, mostly the suburbs.
Well, it's interesting. We've got Dane County down here, and of course, Dane County gets a different, slightly darker green.
Yeah.
That's obvious. We've got Waukesha, Milwaukee, and Kenosha because people are coming up to work in Milwaukee from the Chicago area. And then we have St. Croix County over here, and that's because we have many people living in Hudson, etc., who are commuting to the cities. So we've got a younger, relatively younger population in those counties. But the rest of the map is right here. Okay? So many implications of maps. All right. Well, let me just work through a few more slides here. And feel free to walk around and get tea or coffee or whatever you want. So post-pandemic, and I put that in question marks because really, are we past COVID? No, we're not past COVID. But in terms of congregations, we know that a number of congregations have closed during the pandemic and probably are not going to open again. The numbers are all over the map, and I don't have any specifics for Wisconsin or the UCC, but we do know that some congregations, faith communities, have closed. But it is an opportunity to think about what we want to be moving forward. So what different forms of ministry are implied by those maps, right? New ways of remaining faithful, and then developing a ministry with the forgotten. I love that phrase. This comes from a book written by a Methodist bishop whose wife had dementia. And he has been very much involved with this Respite for All program I was telling you about out of Alabama. So it's a lovely book. The title is Ministry with the Forgotten. But it's a way of thinking in new ways about dementia that is not all doom and gloom. Because the doom and gloom story is the one we hear most of the time. So, let's talk about us for a moment. How are we different? Well, start with the obvious. We experience normative declines in physical and cognitive capacities. So, we all forget stuff. And I have been talking recently about, I get an idea. John and I did this together one night. We both had a really good idea, and then we were going to act on it, and it dropped into a black hole. Where did that go? And we looked at each other. What was it we were going to talk about? Gone. And then, physical too. I've been teaching about aging since I was about 25 years old. I was a brunette. And I can't believe I did that, first of all. But one of the things that I told my students in every semester of every class on adult development and aging is that the two most robust findings in gerontology are that as we grow older, we slow down and we become more cautious. We slow down and we become more cautious. And I certainly know that's true for me, and you may have experience that also. We're more likely to have chronic health conditions. Say no more about that. We could go around the room and you could name them. And we know we have diminishing time left. We know that. And yet a lot of psychologists have pointed out that because we know that I'm not going to live 50 more years. No way. And that makes the present time different. That makes my choices different. Okay? I'm not going to live 50 more years. I know, Esther Garrett is 103, but I'm not sure I'm going to get there. Okay? Or maybe I don't want to either. But it makes a difference in terms of how we view our goals for life. Because we know our time is limited, and we need to come to terms with that. And how often do we talk about that in church? And we experience a lot of loss. All of us experience a lot of loss. Okay? There's more ways we're different. We have smaller social networks. I have had many good friends who have died, and you have too. But the relationships that remain are intense and meaningful. And we're often perceived in ageist ways. And probably we could spend the next, 40 minutes talking about examples of ageism, even in churches. And we may be experiencing what psychologists call interiority. We're thinking more about the bigger issues. We're thinking more about what's really important in our lives. What's really significant. Some of you are thinking about what you can keep and what you can discard. Okay? And that is an exercise in determining what is meaningful to you. Okay? So, what's the role of congregations in the lives of older people? That's what we're getting to in terms of this survey that we'll discuss in a minute. Well, these beliefs that we have, and to know, all are welcome here, so we vary in the beliefs that we have, but hopefully there are some commonalities too. But they help us to hold on to a sense of life meaning. What is really meaningful to us? And how does that reflect our faith, our religious commitments? And faith communities, and this is a lot of research behind this, faith communities contribute to older adults' sense of well-being by doing this. We have regular social interaction. I'm writing a paper right now about this. It's due on Friday. John knows that I'm sort of obsessed about it right now. But this fact that we can walk into this building and see another person be welcomed, say hello, get a hug or whatever, this is wonderful. This is so valuable. This regular social interaction that we have. This is good for our health, our mental and our physical health. Tons of research shows this. You've been all hearing about the Surgeon General writing about loneliness, right? Okay? People who have regular opportunities to gather in faith communities have lower levels of loneliness. We engage with the arts, especially music. I mean, every Sunday we get this. It's fabulous. We sing together. Now, how many people who don't have a regular opportunity to worship, how many of them sing together on a regular basis? That's amazing that we do that every single week. Intergenerational. I mean, it's so fabulous to see those kids there was a very tiny baby in church today. Did you see her with a little red thing around her? Oh my gosh. This is marvelous. How many social institutions out there offer us regular opportunities to interact with children and teenagers? We are an age-segregated society, but not here. This is worth a lot. Challenges to customary ways of thinking about the world. Yeah, sometimes we get challenged, right? We all hear about how, in the 21st century, the year 2024, people only read newspaper articles that they'll agree with, or magazines or television or whatever. But here we get challenged to think in new ways. That's significant. And then we get the opportunity for spiritual formation and development. The ageist assumption is that we quit developing spiritually when we're about, 15. No. We all need to be challenged to develop and deepen our spiritual lives, no matter how old we are. So a few thoughts about dementia and spirituality before I get to our surveys. So we all have spiritual needs, and these are 4. We need to give and receive love. We need to have our dignity honored by others. It doesn't matter whether you have Alzheimer's disease or frontotemporal or Lewy body or whatever kind of dementia it is, we all need to have our dignity honored. We need to feel like we belong to something greater than ourselves, and we need to have a sense of meaning and purpose. Now, there's a big football game today. Okay? And there are a lot of people who would say that their experiences as Green Bay Packer fans give them a sense of life meaning, right? People have altars in their houses. And that it gives them, it's something greater than themselves, right? It's Packerland or whatever. But we're talking about something a little bit more than that, right? So think about what the congregation offers you as compared to what the world offers. Now, all of us, right? It doesn't matter whether you have dementia or cancer or any other scary thing. We need this. But people who have a type of dementia have many gifts to give us. They remind us that God loves us and does not care about how we score on the mini mental. Okay? That we can share meaningful experiences, even if it's going to be forgotten cognitively. I hear too many people say, well, I'm not going to go visit my dear friend who has some type of dementia because she's never going to remember that I was there. I've heard pastors say that. John's heard pastors say that. Yeah. Pastors who will leave their calling card to...
John said that.
Yeah. So, but we know from research that the emotional lift that you can give another person through a visit, Bruce, you know all about this, that remains. Okay, and we have ways of testing this. We even stick people with dementia in MRI machines and look at what's happening in their brains. Okay, the emotion remains, the joy, the pleasure that we experience. Even if Bruce's friend is not going to remember that Bruce came and talked about ABC, the pleasure that you had from that coffee is going to stay, and teaches us a new way of thinking about theology. You know, I have a wonderful book that talks about dementia as the strange land that people enter into. And he says, the author of this book says, we need a new theology for this strange land. We need a new way of thinking about God, thinking about our faith commitments, what's really important. We need a new theology, and we're reminded of that when we work with folks who have a type of dementia. And believe me, this work of this respite organization and Fox Valley Memory Project, it's joyful. It really is. So I urge you to think about volunteering maybe. Who knows? Okay. Anybody want to say anything before I go on? Yes.
As difficult as it is to have those visits with someone with dementia, you do get something from it. And I think you've already alluded to some of
yes.
that. And I mean, it can be heartbreaking.
Yes.
And it can be depressing. It can be a lot of things, but it can also be uplifting. And they can give you that.
Yes, absolutely. I experience it all the time. Yes.
I could add a comment.
Yeah.
I've said that through my many, many years of preaching to you privileged people, how many times I talked about Jesus calling us to live in the moment. But I never had a clue how to do that until my friendships with people with dementia who became my mentor to bring me into the moment fully. It's one of the many gifts I've received.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. Anybody else before we go on? All right. So, all religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, all religions ask and try to answer these questions. What is the good life? What constitutes the good life? What is fulfillment? What does it take to feel that fulfillment? And I love this last one. What is required of you? So most of you can recite Micah 8, right? What is required of you? But here's something really curious. When people get a diagnosis of dementia, it's pretty scary. See that in a minute. And we stop thinking about what might be required of them. It's like you get a free pass, you're off the hook. But then how do you retain a sense of meaning and purpose in your life if nobody is expecting you to do anything, right? What is required of you? And so I have spent time in memory care with people with very advanced dementia. And you have to be sensitive to the micro moments. And so I can remember sitting at a place down in Oshkosh, and it was in one of those, places where there are a number of people sitting around in wheelchairs and whatever. And somebody dropped a tissue, and the person sitting next to her reached down and picked it up and handed it. That was a meaningful act, right? That woman who didn't remember stuff and didn't have language really, she was able to help the person sitting next to her. We need to be able to see those kinds of things that are happening and to realize that people with dementia still want to be able to give. And we need to find ways for them to do that. And that's another reason why this Respite for All program is so fabulous, because they build service into it. And we do this in Fox Valley Memory Project too. We do service projects at our memory cafes sometimes because people need to do that. And we remove it from them when they get that diagnosis. Oh, well, we'll just take care of you. Yeah. No. Okay. All right. So these questions may also arise. What's the good life? What is fulfillment? And what is required of me when the doctor says you have dementia, most likely of Alzheimer's type or any other type, right? it seems like when we hear that diagnosis that all that other, what is required, what is the good life, what's fulfillment, that just gets swept away. Now we have to think about, oh my gosh, you have this scary thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So who can help us answer these questions? Well, we can. So I want to launch now into the surveys that we did with the congregations in Wisconsin and some in Michigan. So what would you say about this? These are, so I made up this survey, and it had a 4-point scale, of course, data. And I can give you the data, but you probably don't care about that. It went from strongly agree to strongly disagree, et cetera, et cetera. And then we allowed people to fill in answers, okay, so they could write stuff too in addition to scoring it. So what would you say about this? Our building has no barriers for participation for older people. I was really excited to see that they fixed the hearing loop.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. How are we doing here at First Congregational in terms of vision, physical accessibility? It looks like you have a thought.
Well, we're a little lacking in that building.
Yeah. Well, you can't even get there.
Exactly.
Right. But we do have an elevator. Yeah.
For this
For this building, right? Yeah.
Sit.
Bathrooms? Everybody okay with the bathrooms? Accessible?
As long as they all have grab bars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eileen?
I'm sorry, I'm jumping to the last, the cognitive
Yes.
limitations. How do we accommodate cognitive limitations? What would happen from the pulpit amongst the congregants? What should be happening to get over those cognitive limitations?
Can you hear Eileen? Should
I'm
she
sorry.
say about the last one? How are we ensuring that there are no barriers for people with cognitive limitations? Are we as welcoming as we could be? A lot of people will say, John has said this many times, people will say, well, I'm not bringing my dad to church anymore because he's not going to really understand or remember the sermon. And then John will say,
It's not meaningful to have friends greet him by name. It's not meaningful to hear the scripture texts and sing the hymns he's been singing his whole life. You go on and on about how Father can participate.
Right.
Sometimes somebody would say, well, I can't bring him to church anymore because sometimes there's an outburst. So, how about the children?
we're handing
And
him
we
Cheerios.
welcome somebody who
Right.
maybe will have a verbal outburst. Yes, we do it.
Yes.
Not if you're old, though.
Right. And also, John has said, there are a lot of people who don't remember my sermons.
Anyway.
So one of the things that Peter is trying through First English is to do special services for people with dementia, probably pretty more advanced. And John and I had the opportunity this summer to experience an amazing Mennonite chaplain who demonstrated to us how she does worship in memory care. It was just a wonderful experience, how she brings music in, how she's spontaneous with people. She has funny little things that she passes around. She really embraces the idea that comes from my very good friend Ann Basting, which is you should forget memory and try imagination. Forget memory, try imagination. And this chaplain, working with people with very advanced dementia, does this beautiful job of evoking imagination and joy in worship. It can be done. Oh my gosh, it makes me absolutely crazy when pastors go to long-term care communities and bring their sermon from Sunday and wonder why people are falling asleep. Anyway, yeah. So, just to say a few more things about the survey that we did. Most people who responded talked about physical access. They did talk about bathrooms being a problem in some churches. There are some churches still that are not accessible in terms of steps. And of course, it's very costly to try to remediate that. Yeah, oh, go ahead.
I heard one of our members talk about that we're not friendly in terms of wheelchairs.
Aha.
That we need to have some area that's convenient for wheelchairs to sit in without having to be in the aisle.
Or in the back. Yeah, right. Yeah.
You have plenty of space. I heard someone talk about that too. They never came on a communion Sunday in their wheelchair because they felt like they were in the way in the aisle.
Yeah.
There was no other place.
We did address that.
Yeah.
I took out the whole section of pews on that right-hand side for wheelchairs. That was the purpose of that.
Okay.
And that was 10, 15 years ago.
Well, we need to
Maybe we need to advertise that.
advertise it.
Well, that, and I was thinking about that, about communication. People with dementia are not necessarily recognizable. Andy and Beth are recognizable with their disabilities.
Yes.
So it's easy to respond.
Yes.
People with hearing or vision loss are not necessarily recognizable. So we have large print bulletins, but how well do we promote that or promote where people with wheelchairs?
Right. Yeah.
I was also thinking, if we had screens in front of the church, people with visual issues might be able to participate more actively, just automatically, rather than asking for that special bulletin or whatever.
Yeah. So one thing that we could do is to start to ask people, what changes do you think we need to make? Yeah. Instead of just assuming we know. Right.
The other thing someone said to me at one point was that their daughter was in a wheelchair, and so at confirmation, all the other kids were up on the step.
Oh.
And a ramp was built. It's here somewhere.
Uh-huh.
A wheelchair to get up. But what if one of the pastors broke their leg?
Oh, I know.
I mean, or something.
Jeannie.
Yeah.
Jeannie had trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
Or we're on a scooter and you have to do everything on the floor. There's no way to get.
Yep.
We have railings now to get to the chancel too, by the way.
Yes.
I put up, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
Difficult.
And we have a ramp that's behind the chancel in that cubby in the back that we've used. And somebody brought up about the school in accessibility. We've studied that in facilities for about 5-10 years.
I know.
The only answer
Longer than that.
The only answer is to tear the school down.
Yeah.
There's no way to fix that problem.
Yep. Well, the next one is one that has come up. It's an issue that has come up in every single meeting I have ever had where we're trying to figure out, what does our community need for older adults? Not just people with dementia, but older adults in general. It's this one. Transportation. Okay? So do our older members have the ability to easily get to worship? Can they get to our social events? Can they get to our educational programs? Okay? Transportation, right? How many of us want to drive at night? Is there any way for people to, get rides, or do we worry about liability, or blah, 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 right? We used to have a van that came from the Heritage. What happened to that?
The van is still there.
Is it coming to church?
No, it hasn't come here.
Oh, it was wonderful.
The whole life of the heritage.
It was wonderful to have I called them the Heritage Ladies. I guess there were a couple of men too.
You brought them to a women's retreat.
Yeah.
That was fun.
So, are we thinking about this? Are we thinking about people not being able to get to our worship services, but to our wonderful programs at other times in the day, during the week, etc.? Transportation. In terms of what was said by people in the conference, a lot of people in rural areas are talking about no bus service, only local taxis, no carpooling, people concerned about parking, especially in winter, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Are we doing a good job on that?
There are
Nick,
people,
oh, go ahead.
There's one person that I know that cannot come to church on Sunday because he relies on the bus, and the bus doesn't run on Sunday.
Yeah. So are we figuring out a way to get him here? Our congregation addresses the loneliness and social isolation experienced by some of our older persons through a variety of programs designed to meet specific needs. So are we really focusing in on addressing loneliness and social isolation? Now, they're not the same. You could be socially isolated and not feel lonely. Loneliness is an emotional response. But, are we really addressing this? Are we training visitors? We have friends in Christ, okay? We'll talk about Stephen ministry in a little bit, but are we really doing this? A number of the congregations replied that it's only the pastors who do this.
What?
Only the pastors. Some people talked about occasional social events, but can people get to them? All right, like next Saturday. Do we have any people out there who want to come next Saturday but don't have transportation? One congregation has, listen to this, they have clubs for knitting, book discussions, potlucks, games, quilting, child sponsorship programs, One congregation has a men's group but no longer any women's groups. Okay, what happened to our circles? Yeah.
By the wayside.
Yeah. What happened to those social groups? They're gone. Yeah.
I would just like to say something. I'm not lonely, but I am alone.
Yes.
But I do have a sense of isolation sometimes because all it would take is for people to call one another. All I would ask.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
At Chrysalis, I had people sign up who would offer to give a ride.
Uh-huh.
Well, why couldn't they call me?
Yeah.
Because I really feel a little reluctant to ask people.
Of course you do. I know.
I
And
mean, I'm okay now, but I wasn't. And
but multiply that by so many people reluctant. Oh, I don't want to impose.
I'm right.
I don't want to be a burden.
By the way, a little context, we have more than 100 members over the age of 80.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And Betty Massaros has put together a phoning group to do regular telephoning, but we could do a lot more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And this is a marvelous opportunity for our members who are unable to get here on Sunday mornings. We can ask them to be part of a phoning ministry. People who live in assisted living, who can still use their telephones, they could be doing that. All right? That would give them a meaningful role to help others.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't be that hard to figure out how to do it.
I know I was kind of angry during the pandemic that I never heard from one of 3 pastors that didn't care. Never saw them other than streaming, which it's nice, but I don't really like it a lot.
Yeah.
Never a phone call, reaching out, how are you, what can I do for you? And somebody at the office said, well, we have, how many, 1100 or 1700 or something.
Or 700 or whatever.
They don't expect that.
Yeah. Well,
Well, then they shouldn't expect me to give anything either. But
and then we can say, what can we do about this? It's not that hard a problem to solve. Get some dedicated volunteers to do this. Yeah.
Listening to you, one of the things that can happen though, like Mary Jo's Zoom Bible study kind of thing, people who live in a situation with multiple people, they might come together to participate in something like that.
Sure.
Or if they didn't come to church but watched by Zoom, they could collect together versus
Absolutely.
individually in their room.
Somebody else would worry about the technology.
yeah,
Yeah.
somebody has to be able to know how to do that.
Well, but you can invite the people
Yeah.
if you have, anyway.
Yeah.
So I think,
Yeah.
that's probably an underutilized kind of satellite gathering that then helps them get to know each other better also.
Exactly. And that's what I said. That's a perfect example of thinking creatively about how to address some of these issues, right? We can do this. And, yeah.
Thanks for opening the creative.
Let me see, what else was I going to say? Many of the people who replied to our survey had no idea what their congregations were doing, kind of like what you were saying. I don't know, maybe the pastors do it. Okay. Our congregation has multiple effective ways of communicating regularly, including with members, including those without internet connections. Okay, how are we doing in that? How are we doing for our people who are not online? I have several really good friends who don't do anything online, and they are increasingly isolated.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's, it just seems like every month I'm recognizing more and more things that they are unable to do because they do not do things online.
Right.
So, yeah.
Recently, we looked at that over 80 list and tried to figure out who did not have an email address.
Uh-huh.
And we added them to the weekly mailing of the bulletin and the sermon, and they get the devotional books,
Right.
that kind of thing. Which I found quite curious here in a congregation of somewhere over 1,000 people. We only were mailing out 17.
Oh.
In small churches that are 100 that I've served, they mailed out 30. So we went through and that list is growing now.
Okay.
And I'm sure there are other people out there that might. To my knowledge, we haven't heard from any of those that we newly contacted or are sending. But if anybody knows anybody that has no email address, let the office know.
Yeah.
Because they can receive at least that much.
Mm-hmm.
My mother was very excited to get that.
Yeah.
It's hard for them to see on the screen, and
Uh-huh.
that's a contact from the church.
The contact from the church. Somebody has remembered me.
That's a very big page, a
Yeah.
little card.
Yep. Somebody has thought about me. Right.
I would add one dynamic, I think it's very specific to our situation as a congregation, and that is the remarkable amount of change in our staff leadership, and that leaves many, many wonderful elders who the staff don't know and don't know their stories. Folks who have given amazing leadership, who are beloved saints. And there's now a real effort, Mary Jo and Diane, to connect with folks, for which I'm really, really grateful. But it's been a great sadness for me that there are people who have been mentors to me through my ministry now have this sense of almost complete disconnection. And, the staff turnover hasn't helped, to put it mildly. It takes a long time to know people and to know their stories.
Sure. Yep. But we can tell those stories. I was very impressed about a year ago going to a funeral at St. Joseph's in town. And this was a funeral for a woman John and I had known a long time with quite advanced dementia. I was so impressed by the priest who had only been there like 2 weeks, and he gave this wonderful funeral sermon for this woman that he really didn't know, but he got it in terms of what she had meant to this congregation. So I poked around on their website, and I saw that they had regular honoring of grandparents and their older members, and just telling a little bit about their stories. And we could do that. You know, we could figure out creative ways to do that. Yeah.
We used to have an option here before I started working where they would send out the services audio, like over a telephone line. We could look into doing that again if that would be helpful.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
also had some other ideas of people that are on the visiting list and things like that. Like if they have access to a cell phone, maybe just send them like a quick picture.
We used to have a radio
Program. Sure. That sounds really good as well.
long time ago.
But even just like sending people on a list and people
Yes.
that are on our visiting list or whatever, sending them a quick picture from the staff saying, hey, we're thinking about you.
Yes,
Just
exactly.
simple things like that, little quick videos.
Absolutely.
It's in the works.
Good.
Yes.
It can be done. Yes.
I'm just gonna say a name, Sandy Marco, for instance. I don't think she has email address anymore. But she could get like a phone call,
Sure.
a sermon, or, church service. Because I said yesterday, I saw her, okay, let's see, I'm going to church tomorrow. I said, well, how are you gonna get there? Well, so-and-so's, I said, I'm not gonna pick you up. That's all the way across town.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have been really late if I would have done it. So it would be nice if she could have more contact.
Yes.
And even like getting the bulletin. I don't know, does she do it?
I know, I can check.
Okay.
And because she can't, she can't figure out. She does have a computer,
Mm-hmm.
but time doesn't always
I
click
know.
with her.
Right. Well, John and I had a wonderful experience through the pandemic of hooking up with our phones. So, church was broadcast, and Esther did not have any kind of, tech. And John was connected with Arlene. Arlene's last name. But it'll come.
We have these moments.
We have this moment. So anyway, I would put my phone in front of the speaker on John's desk, and he'd put his phone in front of the other speaker, and so I'd call Esther, he'd call Arlene, and the three of we would all listen to church together. And then after the service was over, I'd take my phone and I'd go chat a little bit with Esther and
Coffee
John.
hour.
Yeah, we had coffee hour. And John would chat with Arlene. And it was incredibly meaningful to the two of us. We did this from our cabin and we did it at home. And it was very low tech. It was like phones. Yeah. Okay. Our staff and lay leadership are knowledgeable about the many types of dementia and meaningful ways of ministering with people. I don't know. Our staff has had a lot on their plates. But there are tremendous resources out there for ministering with people with some type of dementia. It's not hard to access these resources. I've got a lot of them at home. Be happy to share if we want to do a real focused time about that. Because it's hard. Because, they have a lot that they have to attend to. But remember the maps, okay? Remember what's coming? The greatest risk factor for any type of dementia is age. So here we are.
We have to remember to repeat this with our new minister,
Oh, yeah, sure.
this meeting right here.
Yeah, we can. I have the slides.
It's filmed as well.
And on tape.
Yep.
Our congregation offers meaningful opportunities for children and youth to connect with older persons. What do you think about that?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Tell me more, Gail.
I love it when John Albrecht has the children sing with the adult choir. And I think that's an excellent example of yes. But I don't see us interacting and helping a lot in the youth program. I think we're all reluctant with that, of getting in there and doing something with the kids. And we should, it would make our lives more beautiful.
Well, I know that some people in the room, like Tom, have had a very meaningful ministry as a mentor for confirmation. I think that's a fabulous program.
That is.
How do you get to be a mentor? I would like to be a mentor, but I
Pastor.
Write that down.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think we could think more creatively about this because it was interesting in terms of the answers. There was one answer here. Everything we do is intergenerational, but the connection is not always meaningful. So yeah, we see kids go up front and they sing, which is lovely, but how do we get to really connect with the younger folks in the congregation?
So I remember you were giving the choir example, I remember what a thrill it was as an 8-year-old boy singing with the grown-ups.
Sure.
And I don't know if kids are similar in that, but it also gives me a thrill to sing with them.
Absolutely.
And so that is like we've got a common purpose. And are there other ways that we can work together? Some of the Wednesday night, where and some of us do, some of us don't, but there is a chance that shared making Christmas ornaments and that kind of stuff. And we could do it maybe more often, not just at Christmas and Easter or whatever. You know?
Right. Exactly.
On the first Wednesdays, the middle school kids help clean up, so we're working together in the kitchen.
Yeah.
That's good. Type thing. I mean, there could be game night. There could be anything.
Right.
It's possible.
Yeah. And we can teach our young people how to visit in a joyful, meaningful way in assisted living, long-term care, memory care, yada yada. You know, we can do that. It's not just a matter of going and being cute and singing a couple of songs, but we can teach them how to interact, how to talk, how to use imagination. We've done this through the Memory Project in terms of doing art projects, etc. Matt?
I was thinking even like for younger children too, maybe like a reading buddy program. Read to a child.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's assisted living, here, whatever.
We have one I go to one at school, and I'm trying to think.
That's a school. I'm not.
Up the street here.
Okay.
And it's nice.
I'm sure it would be fun.
I mean, I'd like to hold on to that child a little bit.
Sure.
I don't know that they want to get held out.
I bet they do.
It might be helpful to really think about mission and outreach services, whether it's meals at Pillars or whatever, designed to have the kind of interaction on an ongoing service-based thing. On an ongoing, it's almost like forming a team of these certain number of people from different generations. But it's a conscious choice that this is, we're going to look for projects that we can do across the generation, whether it's cleaning up the grounds or serving at Pillars or going on a nomming walk or whatever. We consciously choose that we'll make this include people from all age groups.
Right. And think how many ideas we're coming up with just sitting around here today to be intentional about it, to identify this as something that would serve the young people and the older people, right? Be good for all of us. So, and it's not going to cost a lot of money or any. Okay. Our staff and laypersons do a good job of addressing the grief and loss that can accompany aging not only from deaths of loved ones, but from retirement, relocation, and other major life changes. This is one that I don't think many congregations are really paying much attention to. Yes, we have memorial services, but
But you might have to be dead to get one.
but
Very commended.
But do we, I mean, there are liturgies that, I have books that have these liturgies in them. There are liturgies for people who have to relocate. This is a loss. This is an enormous loss when you have to relocate or when you choose to relocate. And sometimes those two are blurred, right? But we could, there are liturgies to say, God is in this new place, and there are new opportunities for you. But do we do that? Do we ever think about the grief that comes from having to make those changes? Or when somebody retires, do we say, congratulations? I hate retirement cards. It's all about, oh, go have fun in Florida or whatever. But do we do any kind of service to say, you are now entering a new part of your life, and we can imbue that with spiritual meaning now that you are retiring, because that's a loss, right? But do we recognize that you might be grieving that? And I'm sure you can think of a lot of other examples. And we could do this, right? We could. So, yeah, lots of opportunities here. And most people in Wisconsin and Michigan thought their churches were not doing a very good job of this. So it's not just us.
I don't think it's anything that we really ever thought about.
Right.
It's beyond our imaginations.
Mm-hmm. We have not thought about it.
Yeah, we've treated it more, as you said, that, oh, whoopee, you've retired. You know,
Yeah.
rather than something that would be more meaningful.
This is a major life change.
Yeah.
And God may be calling you to do something new, but we don't, it's all secular. Hooray, you're retired. You know, now you can do whatever you want and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Oh, I could talk for hours on that one. Yeah.
I have the letter that our new co-pastor put out.
Yes.
And the relocation thing. This is, however, also a time of anxiety, stress, grief, and sorrow. Holy moly. Preparing to move after nearly 14 years in the same community is overwhelming.
Yes.
This is a young, mid-40s woman, very capable, and yet a great example of the stresses of change.
Yes, absolutely.
I like silly ones, dresses of change. I've served in, the last 3 churches. One for 6 months, one for 3 months, one now for 1 for a year and a half. And you are the only people I know in Appleton, except maybe 2 other people there. And then there's the boundary that says I can't contact you anymore, and you can't reach out to me for any kind of pastoral contact. And so I might as well move out of town, because I can't do it. So I don't think of it as grief so much as that last day when we've said our goodbyes. Then it's like
I know. Yeah.
But then I pack.
Yeah.
That's
Take you with me in my heart.
And you'll be with us too. But
a different kind of grief.
Yes, it is. And we need to acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But Mary Jo, even the UCC rituals around completing the ministry
on your chair
are much more about, you all darn well better honor the boundaries. It's like a comp thing rather than a sharing in a loving goodbye that includes an element of grief. That's just my editorial opinion. But
No, it is.
My editorial opinion is that people don't understand the boundary issues, and they should have a boundary course for lay people, which I think is coming.
Okay.
Now, what are you talking about, boundary?
No,
We're talking about the fact that when John retired from senior ministry here, he did not step foot in
yes.
this building
For 2 years.
for 2 years.
How many people
And
know
you
that?
are our friends.
Well, I know
This, like Mary Jo was saying,
Yeah.
this is where we established friends. He was pastor for 23 years. And so you all are our friends. This is our friendship group. We could not come for 2 years. And the reason is because you need the new pastor then to move into that role, and people can't be calling him to say, "Oh, please do my funeral, please."
Well, they wouldn't do that.
Please marry Please marry my son.
This goes- That's 30 months from now.
Can't do it.
It comes out that way.
I wanted to say there is a church I know of. I can't tell you the name of
Yeah.
it because my friend told me, who's very knowledgeable, where the pastor did continue to hang in there and really pretty much destroyed.
It's a big problem.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big problem. So, yes. Okay.
So,
So this is an interesting one, and we're going to stop soon. But this is one that gets debated a lot. All right. Do we have contemporary music? Do we have a rock and roll band up front? Okay. Is our liturgy attracting young people like we want it to? And then people will say, no, all the old people, all they want is the old hymns and blah, blah, blah. And that's ageist, right?
Yes.
That assumption about older adults not being open to change is an ageist assumption. And it's not true, by the way. Okay? But this is something that we need to really think hard about, you know, and educate people about this. You know, whether we're talking about the music, the liturgy, the art in the building, the you know, all of this. Is it something that can be meaningful, regardless of age? So, and there were some interesting comments here. The worship committee has quite senior members, and what they do has not been shared with younger members. All right. Emmanuel, I'm not sure which Emmanuel that was, is still stuck to the old conservative German ways. Being hostile to the LGBTQ population is not an attractive stance to young people. So, God bless our Methodist friends who are going through great trauma right now
Terrible problem.
with that. Yeah. So, again, something to think about. All right. And then this one. We have trained ministers like Stephen ministers who know how to talk with older persons about their spiritual concerns related to all these things we talked about. Well, our Stephen ministry program is
It's not running right now.
right.
Do we blame that on COVID? Probably, but
Yeah.
I'm not even sure who has been trained.
I know some who have been.
Yeah.
Yes. But
It's kind of expensive.
what's that?
It's lengthy and expensive.
Yes, it is. Yes. But the Friends in Christ program is not lengthy and expensive.
And it hasn't grown and it's stagnant.
Yeah.
So, right now, so.
So we've all been in this kind of holding pattern, and I think perhaps this morning is giving us some ideas of ways forward that we might take. So I appreciate you all coming today. This is my last question on the survey. You can see my data if you want to. But
I want to see the t-test.
there you go. But thank you all for your good ideas. Thank you, Mary Jo, and Barb, everybody for pulling this together. And blessings to all of you. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, now I have to unhook the tech.
And make a couple comments.
Yes.
I'm a CPA, so this kind of thing, I need to learn how to parent children. But, my grandmother was in the Heritage 6 months after it opened.
Uh-huh.
And then there were lots of people there, and you had to be able to walk. And boy, they tested you for it.
Sure.
You could not come in with a walker.
Right.
And then she was driving at the beginning. Well, people aren't doing that now. And almost, 80% of the ones that come in now come in with a walker.
Mm-hmm.
And they're having problems now, besides my parents, probably my dad, with power wheelchairs.
Right.
Going around, and they're going to give people a driver's test. Well, that's real different. Well, my grandma used to go to church. Well, now, that my mother's in a different set of care, she can't.
Mm-hmm.
She can't come. But she was one that said, well, what happened to the women's group? Nobody comes and talks to me. But, that things are changing. How many care centers can you go to? And how many churches are coming in there, and how do you mix and match it? And there used to be tons of people there. They did the making, what are the bands? Empty Hall.
Yeah.
Over at the Heritage, with a bunch of people listening to playing. They had a blast. But
Great idea.
Think creatively. You can do it.
But I think education here is like we're doing for the mental health and LGBT and stuff. We need education. I need it. She spoke at the last 2 conferences along with Jan Avery.
Yeah, she's the chair of the committee, yeah.
And there are things out there, but they're amazing. And Jan started talking 2 years about this stuff and things that you could do and churches are doing. And I got real excited. But I kept saying I didn't want to be on the steering committee. I had other passions. So I think it'd be good if we could get something going.
Good. Okay.
I'm not accustomed to not talking, but I've been very well behaved.
Yes, you have.
But an idea I floated here a while back before you came, Mary Jo, is how hard would it be in each Sunday bulletin to have a 2-paragraph introduction to one of our elders and some stories about his or her relationship with the congregation through time. And everybody thought it was a great idea, but things were dissolving into chaos here and everywhere. But one of my dearest friends in the congregation is a guy named Harry Spiegelberg. He was chair of the search committee that called me and now has both Parkinson's and vascular dementia, and I visit regularly. But I just heard this week, or reheard a story as told by his wife Bonnie, that during the search process, he and a wonderful saint of the church, Paula Chandler, would pose as husband and wife to visit churches in other Wisconsin cities to hear someone preach. And Bonnie said, and I'd have to remind Harry, hold her hand like she's your wife. I would love to bring stories like that to the life of the contemporary congregation, because they're great stories of wonderful people who don't get here.
Yeah. And that's what St. Joe's is doing. So if any of you know people at St. Joe's, check out what they're doing with these little paragraphs about the folks in their congregation.
Just take someone to do it.
Right. Okay, thank you all.